Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the UX world. Today's episode is all about voice game design. This is something that we've kind of touched upon a little bit in previous episodes. We've never got down into the detail of game design, so this is going to be an immensely interesting episode for anybody who is interested in game design, who is wanting to get into the kind of whole space. Or if you just like playing voice games, then this will be a really good insight into how it all hangs together and how it's all happening behind the scenes. Our guest today, a very special guest indeed. He is immensely passionate about the whole audio game and voice game experience. He's a voice game developer himself. He's been putting a lot of content out there, and probably the only person who I've seen putting out content purely focusing on voice games and voice game design. So this is going to be an immense episode. Our guest today is Florian Hollandt. Hello there, Florian.
Hello, Kane. I'm very, very honored to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. And I say us because we're also joined by Dustin Coates. Hello there, Dustin.
Hey, everyone. This is going to be a great episode. Really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Have you ever developed any voice games, Dustin?
No, I don't think so. I'm more on the business focus side. I prefer to play the games than to create them.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Florian, should we get started? Should we just do a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into the whole voice game thing?
Yes, sure. I'd love to. I think I'll give you the 3-minute version. This should be enough. So I didn't start out studying game design or anything. I started by studying biology and pursuing an academic career in bioinformatics or computational biology. Started a PhD doing some big data stuff and graph modeling. But after some time, some months, this got really boring. Anyway, I kind of dropped out after some months, and from this point on, my career got a bit colorful. I was doing some months of sales for a biotechnology company, and then got into email marketing, which is the field in which I've been working for the last 4 years. So far, first in technical support, later solution consultant, and then switching sides and doing technical email marketing manager for a family shopping online retailer. And right now, this is professional background is taking me to be part of Jobo starting in April, which I'm really happy and excited about. By the time this podcast comes out, it will already have happened. Woo! Yes. And on the same time, I've also been had several hobbies. I've got a kind of a new hobby every half a year. I've been doing trampoline jumping and baking bread and then self-quantification, coaching, all kinds of stuff. But there are some hobbies or interests that have been with me a long time. One is in psychology. I'm really interested in how people perceive the world, how they make decisions.
It's a good interest to have for the whole kind of voice design thing, isn't it? Psychology kind of plays a large part in all of this kind of stuff.
Exactly. This is all feeds into this how I came to voice design. It's a psychology trail as well, and it's also the language thing. I've also been interested in languages. I started learning kind of one dozen of languages. Only ended up speaking 3 or 4.
Only? I can barely speak one.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, all of those things kind of coalesced or converged into this is a hobby of developing chatbots about 1 year ago.
All right. So you started off doing on the chatbot side of things.
Yes, exactly. I started developing chatbots for Telegram and Facebook Messenger. mostly psychology-based chatbots. So the one I built first was doing coaching. Because from the beginning on, I was thinking, well, how can I somehow provide value to the users? What got me first. And there were three things out there that really inspired me. One was how chatbots brought value by conversation. You've personally met Steve Warswick, who created the Mitsuku chatbot. And he regularly shares on his Twitter account, for example, a mail he got by his users who really take comfort in a chatbot and having conversations with him, feeling like this chatbot really understands them and gives them some company. Like, wow, this is the kind of value that I want to provide with my software products. And another inspiration I had for providing value with chatbots was Alison Darcy with Wobot. I think she was also at the London meetup that you've attended.
Yes,
but I'm not sure. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I don't think I met her. I had to dart off quite soon as it finished. But yeah, I recognize the name. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a chatbot that is all about asking the user on a daily basis how it feels, what activities he did today, in order to track down some maybe habits that they had that were connected to how good or bad they felt. Like, wow, really cool. And the third thing that inspired me to go into this direction was that I've just read a book about coaching. And I mean, coaching is something that you really think about as something that has a lot to do with empathy, with wisdom, with actually connecting to and understanding people. Like, well, let's try to do this with a chatbot. Not very intuitive thought, but what brought me to it was that I read that even those people, they use kind of a patterned conversation to get their coachees to the point of admitting that they need to make a decision to break some habit or become some obstacle to improve their lives. Like, okay, let's try to reproduce this pattern or this kind of algorithm with a chatbot. Yeah. Long story short, this really didn't work out for one reason, because this chatbot was really not really able to be robust towards all the real life actual conversation or things that people would ask it, but also because the use case is totally wrong. If people actually need real life advice, they would never turn to a chatbot.
Yeah. So how did you? Was that a realization you came to, or was that something that you found out through, doing it and speaking to people who were using it or not, or what? How did you kind of realize that?
Well, I didn't realize it from the beginning. I invested weeks and months of my life into building that chatbot. It's still one of the most complex things I've ever built. Just when I was launching it and trying it out with different people, it was never exited to the beta test stage. You can't test it really, except if you go to my GitHub page and download it yourself. And yeah, this has got me thinking, how else can I provide value? And this was about the time when I discovered Alexa skills. I was intrigued by it. It's like, okay, don't want to do the same thing all over again and try to build an Alexa skill coaching bot. Well, actually, I developed one, but just because it was easily feasible and was a good project for starters. But one other thing that I had in mind how I could provide value was actually playing games. Because the use case I had in mind were elderly people. I had in mind that they might be in a nursery home or maybe at home, and maybe might want to do something other else than a crossword. Think like, what would my grandmother like to do with me if I were there and could provide her company, and would probably be playing cards. I mean, I'm not talking about poker or blackjack. It's more in the UK. Do you play Crazy Eights? Do you know that game?
I don't think so. Tell us how would you play that?
Well, in Germany it's called Mau Mau. It's a shedding type card game. You have a number of players, and each of the players has 7 cards on their hand, and there is one off card in the middle. And whenever you have one card that matches either the color or either the suit or the value of the off card, you can discard the card and row wise. And if you can't discard the card, you have to take a new one. Yeah, well, that's basically the game. It's really not something exciting, but it's kind of entertaining and so easy that you can play it with children and everyone.
Yeah.
It's like, well, let's try to do this as a game, so that the old ladies or old gentlemen could play this at home or in their nursery homes. Yeah, and then I set out to build it, and also invested 2 or 3 months into building it. But turned out that I really enjoyed it, and that it had a lot of challenges that I enjoyed tackling. For example, how to make it not sound robotic, and to make it repeat itself all over, how to build proper grammar into it, and such kind of things. And then I launched it, and took off really well. This was so far the most successful game that I developed. For some weeks, it was like among the top 15 games in the German games skill category. Yeah, and this was a huge boost of motivation that I myself, as just a hobby software developer, could do such a game and actually reach thousands of people with it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who played it. I don't actually know if the actual elderly people played it or not. The reviews I got on Amazon are rather from young people, but maybe this is just kind of confirmation bias, because those are the ones that give reviews on Amazon. But anyway, this really got me encouraged to explore this space some more.
Wicked. So that was your first game, and maybe we'll come on to some of them challenges. So in a little while, that was kind of your first game, and then where did it go from there? Then after that game.
After this game, I mean, this game was so successful. I figured out because it's a game that is really well known in Germany, and a lot of people would be interested in playing it. But it's actually not a game that is really well suited for voice first or voice only interface. So I explored dice games next, because there you wouldn't have cards to remember, each with a suit and a value, but they just have a face, and you can just sum up the eyes of the dice, and implemented some kind of blackjack game with dice, which yeah, I think this is actually so far the best game I've built, but it has, by now it's actually dead. Nobody plays it anymore. Yeah, it has a huge discoverability issue. It really can't be found. I named it Black Dice, or no, I named it Black 12, and the name doesn't seem to be suggestive enough so that people would view it and know that it's fun. But actually, from a game mechanics and engagement perspective, yeah, it's really good. And then after that, well, there are some other games that I won't talk so much about. There's one with cards where you have pairwise comparisons of cards and have to guess if your card is better, or in which category your card is better than the one that Alexa has. And just recently, I'm in exploring the whole field of management simulation games. I've tried to build one and then wrote about this on Medium, but I kind of abandoned it because the concept wasn't really good. But right now I'm developing another one in this regard and hope that the concept is better.
And what's a management simulation game?
With management simulation game, I mean, are you aware of Yes Sire, for example?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Oh, I love that one.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, yes. I would call management simulation game a game where you have some kind of entity, might even be a person, and you have to make the decisions for them in order to kind of to make it grow in some way. It's it's somehow similar to an interactive story game because you also have control over either with either a person or some entity. But you basically you have to do the same decisions all over again. Whereas in an interactive story game, you do different decisions in every turn. Yeah.
And are you building the games that you want to play, or are you building the games that you think the community wants to play? How are you deciding which game types or which games to build next?
I'm kind of following kind of deciding by what I'm intrigued about. I think if I would pursue what I think would be most played, I guess I would maybe do trivia quiz games or something. But this is something that is technically not really interesting to me. So right now I'm trying to explore how complex games can actually be while still being engaging. This category of management simulation games is a category that really moves on this borderland between engagement and too complex.
What are some of the, from what you've seen so far, and that was thanks for putting all that in perspective there, by the way, to go through all of the games that you've kind of developed, that really kind of helps paint a picture for the listeners in terms of your experience in building games. What from what you've been working on and more recently, is this the music manager one you've been talking about just then? Is that the post on Medium about the music management game?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So what are some of these kind of you mentioned about trying to push it as far as it can go technically to make a complex game while still being engaging. What are some of those technical challenges that you've come up against and that you've found?
Well, the technical challenges are kind of all manageable. The biggest challenge that I found for myself that's really kind of posing a limit to which kind of games I can produce is how much content I can provide. I mean, I'm not actually a screenwriter, or I'm not so much of a creative person in this kind of regard of making up stories or people or events. This last game that I had in mind with the music, it relied heavily on content. Some people are good at making content. For example, Yes Sire, we've been talking about that one. This is based 100% on content. Because every round it consumes one piece of content. This is kind of the game I couldn't do. I would be interested in doing it in a collaboration with someone who had that kind of skill set. But if I'm thinking about what games I could produce, I more try to think of cards like card games, where you have to make the same decision all over, but with conditions that vary in a kind of numerical or configuration-wise sense, and still be interesting.
Cool. And you've been doing a 1 game a month challenge.
Oh.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that's going and what it is?
Oh yeah, good call, good call. I really haven't been all that faithful in that one, but I really love the concept of it. And this is really a challenge that I think is would be very healthy to do. It's kind of a New Year resolution. Yeah. So what this challenge is about is that each month for maybe 12 months or however long you want, you would produce one game. And the inventor of this, Chris Kaitila, I think his Twitter handle is McFunkyPants. That's easier to remember. A really, really cool guy. He runs that website where you can sign up. It's completely gamified. You can earn badges. There's a leaderboard and everything for this one game a month challenge. And he sets up one theme for each month that you can follow. And in February it was music, and I thought about which music game I could produce. Ultimately failed. But still learned a lot in the progress. In March, I haven't been following this contest so much because I needed to maintain my Crazy Eights game a bit because how is it even called? Is it called Voice Labs? Yeah, I think it's called Voice Labs. The analytics service. Was discontinuing their services now.
Yeah.
And my game was running with Voice Labs. So I had to make some changes in order to make it robust and not to get a lot of error messages once this service is finally discontinued. And now in April, I started developing a new game, and it's I'm not sticking to the theme set out by the contest, but I still hope to produce to have it finished by the end of April. That's also a good part of the game, that it actually sets you a deadline. It's like, okay, don't continue improving it forever and ever, but here's the end of the month, and by the end of the month you should have it finished. Which in the voice world means you should have finished it 1 week or 1.5 weeks before the end of the month, so that they can still get it published by the end of the month, because certification takes a while, and there might be some iterations.
Yeah, I heard someone say the certification is getting up to about 3 weeks now, is it?
Really?
Yeah,
I've never had 3 weeks. I mean, the longest I think I had was 1.5 weeks.
All right. That seems like a pretty tight timescale to work within then. To get a game kind of conceptualized, kind of built, tested, and then certified and published in a space of 4 weeks is a pretty ambitious. That's a tight timescale, that, isn't it?
Yeah, true. With the game I'm producing, I think it's such a good idea and such a good concept. That I wouldn't push myself and actually sacrifice quality for the sake of making the deadline. Maybe that's an exception. I mean, the spirit of the challenge is more that you shouldn't worry about the quality too much, but rather focus on your output, and do like the 80-20 thing. And release a game that's good enough. And if you feel that you've really hit on something, then you shouldn't release it too soon, and spend some more time working on it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So we kind of discussed some of the games that you've kind of been focusing on in terms of, card games, and they've been experimenting with kind of management games and things like that. Because you've been putting a lot of content out there for reviewing other kind of games, which has been really interesting. Tell us a little bit about what's possible for people out there who haven't created a game yet but might be interested in developing a game for the Alexa platform. Can you just speak a little bit about what is possible, what kind of games are out there, and which ones kind of interest you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, I would categorize the games as following. One, I would make one bin for what I would call fact and fact games and sound machines that basically doing one or more sounds or giving just one funny response, and then that's it. Or maybe have a small dialogue, but not being complex enough for an interactive story skill. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is really kind of borderland. You might not even call this game skills, but yeah, there might be a good starting point. They're not too bad. I've also done one or two of those just to get this developer swag. And then there's the huge category of quiz-like games, maybe quiz-like games and guessing games, which covers a huge amount of trivia quiz skills. I would guess that maybe 40% of all the games out there are trivia quiz games. Yeah, and I would also lump this in with guessing games, like the fabulous Would You Rather. Are you aware of this game? I love it. I love it so much. But technically, it's very similar to a trivia quiz game. So I would put them in the same category. Then there's card and dice games. And the number one game that is implemented in this category is blackjack. Yeah, blackjack is really popular. I mean, there are probably 50 blackjack skills out there. I mean, it's a really cool game. It's really, really well suited for voice. Yeah. Then interactive stories, personal favorite of mine. Not in producing, because I'm not this kind of creative person that can do this. I admire those that can, but I love consuming them. And I mean, I wrote about them quite a bit.
So tell us, yeah, I've seen the few reviews that you've done on a few of them. A Magic Door, one of them, is it? And yes. The Selector Story?
Yes, Selector Story.
Yeah, tell us, because I've never actually used one of those type of games. I've played a few games on the Echo on Alexa, one of which was the Six Swords one before we interviewed Joe DeQuinta a few weeks back. So, as someone who hasn't kind of experienced one of those kind of interactive stories, it sounds really interesting. Tell us a little bit about what an interactive story is and how it all works.
Most people are aware of this Choose Your Own Adventure books. In Germany, that's, we have them in Germany as well, but they're called different. And it's basically this, but in the form of a game. So you have some kind of game world or scenario where you have a character and you guide this character's interactions with the world, typically in the form of decisions you have to make. Do you want to do A or do you want to do B? And depending on how you decide, you're entering a different storyline or a different plot line. And then this is develops over time. And this is a category that is really, really well suited for the voice first world. And there are already some really excellent skills out there. The ones we've now been talking about, the Magic Door, the one you mentioned, or Select a Story. They were basically developed by independent developers that are. Katie Ernst did a business around this, and it's for this level, it's super professional and highly enjoyable to listen to. But there are some out there that have really all the corporate support. For example, the Mr. Robot skill, the Daily 5-9. This is so immensely professional. It's with the original actors' voices, for example, and I mean, Kane, I think you're also always very much interested in how brands might actually use the voice space to create engagement and then to use it for their means. Interactive stories are really big here. I mean, I've seen quite some that are really centered around big movie franchises. For example, other than I mentioned, there is one for Batman. It's called The Wayne Investigation, where you can explore the murder of Bruce Wayne's parents as an interactive story.
Ah, that sounds pretty good. Was that backed by the kind of film itself? Like, was it?
Yes. I think I remember that it was from Warner Brothers, or it's not a fan. What is it called? Fan art thing. Yeah. Or there was a movie, Dunkirk.
Yes.
About,
yeah.
The Battle of France.
Yeah.
There was also an interactive story for that one. And, I haven't seen the movie, but I think these are the voice actors are also actors, from the game. So these are really great ways to extend this story world outward and to make people interact and engage with it more.
Wow. There's some really good examples. I wasn't aware that they were doing things like that. That sounds like a really good use of the kind of voice platforms, isn't it, for obviously promotion, but then as you mentioned at the start, which is kind of the purpose for you kind of trying to get into this, is to add value, and that's a really kind of good way for brands and content producers to do just that, isn't it? And if they've actually got the real actors in there as well, I'll have to check those out because that sounds really interesting. That.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I stopped reviewing them at some point because in terms of the techniques they use, I think I've got a lot of it covered, and it's basically the same techniques all over. But the content is so fresh and so brilliant. It's just a joy doing this. I mean, this has really been kind of a blessing of our family life because right now I always look forward to when we're doing some washing and I have to hang up the washing because I can use this time to consume some, I have 15 minutes of time uninterrupted, can do some new interactive story skills that are out there.
Yeah. That sounds like time I could be spending doing that while I'm washing up or something.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there that a few of these kind of games have been using some of the same techniques, but maybe using slightly different content. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these techniques that are at play and that are used to develop these kind of voice-based games?
Well, there are some top-level, very general techniques, but there are some that are very specific to interactive story games. This was what I had in mind when I said I didn't write a new review for the Wayne Investigation because you don't really learn all that much about it anymore if you already know. If you've already read my review about the Mr. Robot skill, for example. Yeah. So, are you more interested in the let's make this an interactive story game? Do you want to, Kane? Do you want to learn more about building interactive stories, or do you want to learn about techniques for building voice games in general?
Ooh, let's do some techniques for interactive stories first, and then we'll do voice games in general after that.
Cool.
Maybe my utterance there was a bit too complex, was it? Was that for a voice system to pick up? Was I rambling a bit there?
I perfectly captured your intent. Yeah, you said the interactive story first intent.
Indeed.
Yeah, okay. It's really fun playing some Wizard of Oz. It depends a lot on how much content you have and how many storylines you have. In interactive stories, the first thing you might have in mind with interactive stories is that you start at one point at the beginning, and then it branches out, and then you can have all different kind of endings depending on how you act in your world and what decisions you make. This might be so, but it doesn't necessarily need to be so. There are some great interactive stories out there, just like, for example, the Mr. Robot one, that don't branch out all that much. You can take different paths, but they all have converge to one single ending, or maybe to two different endings, but they are still highly engaging. And there are some ways to make that possible. For example, this is what I call fake decisions. They're about: do you want? You need to obtain a USB stick from someone. Do you want to take the bus to his office, or do you want to walk to his office? And then, depending on what you choose, you might have a different sub-adventure on the way, but you still arrive at the same result. But still, you might be if the content is good enough, you might go through skill again just to see what happens when you walk, when you took the bus the first time. Yeah. If you're not up for writing 10 different endings or 64 different endings, that's a good way to increase the decision space that you have without increasing the story space too much, I would say. Yeah.
And when you're doing this planning for the story, what do you do? How do you sketch that out and keep that all in mind?
Well, good question. I've never produced an interactive story game. Katie Ernst has a brilliant blog about this. She is a producer of interactive story games. And she wrote a blog article about that, how you would go about it, and how which steps you need to take. Yeah. So
how do you do this for your skills? I imagine in a management game or in a game that you're building, there's going to be different branching. How are you keeping track of that so that your code, your interaction flow doesn't get too messy and too hard to understand?
Well, typically the games I program are not like that. With the games I program, the games I favor and mostly programmed so far, you sooner or later run back to making the same decision all over again, like with a card game, or it's the same with a management simulation game. For example, with the music band game I had. Each round was basically, do you want your band to go training, or do you want them to promote, or do you want them to give a concert? And then something would happen, and then they would either get more famous or more talented or something. But sooner or later, we would get back to the same decision. So this. And there are certainly some different ways the user can interact and ask different things, but in the end, it always comes back to the same situation. So this kind of keeps the complexity in check. It's not like you have an explosion of branchings and possibilities where all of this can go.
Mm. Cool. So that's, you mentioned there then some of the that was quite an interesting insight in terms of the interactive stories where a decision is made, but you end up at the same point, and then people come back potentially again to try and go down that second route to see if anything's different. That was quite an interesting insight there. So you can keep the same kind of storyline, but you can potentially veer, the methods in which you kind of go down in order to get to that kind of point. Some of the things you'd mentioned and this might even touch upon some of what Dustin was asking just then, your article, that recipe for a great voice first interactive story, and we'll kind of link to that in the show notes. You mentioned there that you would need, before you do this, you need some writing capacity, which you'd mentioned, because creating content for this stuff is obviously going to be quite an overhead. But then you do start kind of going into referencing things like defining the shape of the story graph, and the different kind of choices that you would make, and you've kind of mapped out a few of the, decision trees and options. Is that what kind of, if you were going to do an interactive story, would that be kind of what you would recommend doing in terms of like process mapping this whole thing out?
Well, yes. At some point, it's good to have a diagram of all the different options that you have, the different paths that you can take. So kind of a graph of the possible interactions and results. Yeah. Especially in an interactive story, that's very, very important to have such a thing. But I think in most skills, it doesn't hurt if you have such graphical representation. There are lots and lots of prototyping tools out there that allow you to do such a map and to get yourself an overview of how the schematics of your skill are.
Which prototyping tools, if you were going to recommend some, which ones would you recommend?
Google Presentation.
Okay.
I really don't actually use any prototyping tool. I typically find there's too much overhead, but I'm a developer. I know what's happening in my skill, and I can take full control of it. And I would need the schematics only as a visual aid, and not to try out how that interaction would be. It's just for me, drawing rectangles and arrows is good enough for my.
Do you use any prototyping tools, Dustin, or do you kind of what's your kind of approach?
I will sketch it out by hand. Actually, I've tried some prototyping tools online. And they're useful, but I don't think anything's better than getting out a piece of paper and a pen and drawing it out there. I'm like Florian, that I like to get into the code as quickly as possible. So building out a huge flow before I do that is just keeping me from what I'm really enjoying doing.
Wicked.
Yeah, cool.
So going back to the some of the techniques for developing interactive stories, then we'll cover one or two more maybe, and then we can kind of talk about building games in general. One of the things that I really was interested in when I read the article that you did on the recipe for creating a voice first interactive story was all about the kind of choosing the point of view and the narrative and how you kind of where you place people in the story. Can you tell us a little bit about choosing your point of view and what you mean by that?
Yes, that's a great topic. And this is also something that is has value that is also goes beyond interactive stories. Because with a lot, every game you have a certain point of view. You have basically a narrator that tells you the story and introduces you to the game world, and you have an actor, there are different configurations of how that might be. So in the typical interactive story game, the actor would be you. You're always in charge of the actor, but you have an actor within the game world. So you wake up at the beach. Do you want to follow the beach, or do you want to go to the forest? Then the actor is in the game world. The narrator is somewhere abstract. He's not in the game world, but observing it. And you're outside and making decisions for the actor. This is kind of the typical configuration between the two that you have in most games. If you're in the article, that's the one that is described on the top. But there are some ways where you can switch this interaction that make it more interesting. For example, there are very few of these. You can make Alexa, both the narrator and the actor. So, for example, hey, I'm in a locked room. Please tell me what I should do. Then you tell Alexa what she needs to do to get out. This would provide a really different perspective and a really refreshing way to tell a story.
And quite sort of engaging. What you just said there would kind of bring me closer to the game, if you know what I mean. You would feel as though you were genuinely trying to help, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yes, true. And then there is another perspective or point of view that I really like, which is that Alexa or the narrator, but typically it's Alexa, is also a character in the story that's accompanying you. You're kind of it's the two of you. This is the perspective that the Magic Door, for example, has. There's you and Alexa going this adventure together. In the Magic Door, Alexa doesn't have much of a character, but there are others where she's really doing a lot of her own and feeling free to comment on a lot of what you do. And there might be even some situations where you are separated from Alexa, like need to rescue her out or need to do without her. And this really opens up a lot of possibilities of how you can create or immerse players more in your game. But even also, if you're doing a trivia quiz skill, you could also use such a perspective, like oh no, they're asking me a question again. Okay, Alexa, which answer do you want to make? Please help me. Should I answer A, B, or C?
Yeah, so you can. Yeah, it's interesting that. So you can actually play around with, because I think the challenge with voice and with voice games is that it's all about the environment, isn't it? And creating an immersive environment. You can do that with, visual kind of things. If you're playing a visual game where you are a character and the character's on the screen and it's in an environment, it's very easy to kind of understand where it is and what's happening. Whereas with voice, presumably that's a lot harder. So that seems like a way that you can shape the environment and the characters that are within it is by changing that narrative kind of point, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Wicked. So that's some of the tips and some of the kind of things for developing an interactive story in terms of understanding where your decision trees are, having potentially different routes down to different endings, or you can have kind of fake decisions that take people through to similar points and having more of a kind of linear kind of approach. And then we've sort of discussed a little bit about some of the narration side of stuff and how you can frame things slightly differently and put the player in a slightly different kind of position. What are some of let's kind of take it from interactive stories to voice games in general, and there's lots of different types. You've mentioned some of the card games that you've kind of developed, and we've got the fact ones and the quiz ones, the interactive stories. What is in fact I was going to say the process, but let's talk about we've kind of talked about some of the process. Let's talk a little bit about the tech stack that you use when you're developing these kind of games. So what sort of tools do you use to create the games that you've been working on?
Well, we already mentioned Google Presentations, right? Well, I think I use pretty much a vanilla tech stack. There are some people out there who are using Microsoft Azure and stuff. Well, I work with Lambda. At least for productive life skills. As a development environment, I do it locally with a local webhook. And obviously, I'm using Jovo as Node.js with the Jovo framework to write the skill in.
And for those who haven't heard of Jovo, one, you should listen to the previous episode where we speak with Zan from Jovo. But tell us quickly, why do you use Jovo? Why should someone use Jovo?
There are three good reasons to do so. One is this, the obvious benefit the unique selling position of Jovo is that you can have just write the code once, then you can use it as a backend for both your Alexa skill and an action on Google. If I, for example, with my game that I'm currently developing, is if it works well on Alexa, then I might want to publish it on Google as well, and then it's really easy to do so. Jovo not only provides this JavaScript framework for writing the backend, but also a command line interface that allows you to transform the language model or take the language model that you've created for your Alexa skill and transform it to a language model that is compatible with what's it called, Dialogflow. I never developed a Google Action so far, honestly. But this really makes it totally easy. And another big advantage of Jovo is that their framework has a lot of syntactical candy, if you want. So it's really easy to develop with that one. I mean, the Alexa Skill Kit is also decent. I can't complain. I was developing Mau with the Alexa Skill Kit framework. Jovo is very community driven, and this platform really develops quickly, and it is driven by the requests that we get from the users. And we were also developing skills ourselves, and using this developer experience we're getting here to write to shape the framework in such a way that it serves a voice app developer best.
So, Florian, you mentioned that by the time this podcast comes out, you will be working at Jovo. What are you going to be doing for them?
Great question. Thanks for asking it. I'll be basically managing customer projects. We're a startup, so probably end up doing all kinds of things, including community management, a bit of it. But my main focus will be managing customer projects, basically end to end, mainly as a developer. And maybe designer in some case, which is about what I'm really super excited about, because I haven't been trained as a software developer, and now the experience that I have from 9 months of building Alexa skills and chatbots really enables me to have this position. This is what I'm extremely happy about. But then I'll also do some stuff that goes beyond development, being in touch with customers and figuring out the business side of it. So it will be a pretty diverse kind of job.
Yeah. On that note, you mentioned this will be your first developer job. You've been doing this for months now. What would you recommend for others who wanted to get into building voice games, who maybe aren't developers or just haven't worked with voice before?
Which software, or what do you mean?
How did you go about learning this skill? How did you go about learning how to build voice games? So if someone else wanted to run with it and they said, "Hey, Florian, what do I do?" What would you tell them?
That's a really great question. Amazon provided some excellent introductory material about it. I started out at their website and their GitHub repository, and it was really well documented and gave a really head start about the whole concept of how a skill works, and how it is how the backend is connected to the device and how everything is processed. At Joe, we also have a great documentation about how to use our framework and how the internal workings of it are. So if you up for learning it, there are lots of breadcrumbs everywhere along the way that take you each step along the way. But it totally doesn't help to attend one of the developer days that Alexa is holding every now and then. I did this, and I developed Alexa skills before, but this was really kind of another boost or push that I got. Got a lot of great ideas. Actually, I got my idea for Mau Mau and for the use case of elderly people at such an event. Really good.
Cool. We'll put the links to those, the Jovo documentation, the where people can find out about those Alexa developer days, and also we'll link to the Amazon website as well. There's a lot of guidance on there, isn't there, for people getting started. Fantastic. So what we'll do, Florian, we'll link to all of the articles that we've spoke about in this whole podcast. We'll put all of your links to Medium in there. But where else can people can find you online, and where could people kind of tap you up if they wanted to learn a little bit more about you?
Well, I'm mostly active on Twitter and on Medium. This is where I push my articles. I'm not in Facebook, of course I'm kind of in LinkedIn and the German platform Xing, but I'm not really active there. So Twitter is really the best place to catch me.
Cool. What's your Twitter handle?
Florian Hollandt. Holland with double L and DT in the end.
Fantastic. Wicked. Well, thank you very much, Florian, for joining us. That's been absolutely interesting. That's been really, really good. I think we had a really good mix and overview of kind of looking at the whole kind of game platform, the whole game space for people who aren't really aware of it, and then also some technical stuff and some design stuff. I think there was quite a few different layers going on there. That was really, really good. Thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really look forward to more quality games and more being on the market and more developers getting active in this field. I think there are exciting times ahead of us.
Indeed. And cheers, Dustin. Cheers for joining us again.
Yes. Thank you very much, Florian.